Okay, good morning everyone. I wanted to reach out, send out a video to kind of go over what we're doing this week. So, quick reminder, right? Last week we worked on a project with regards to the Bill of Rights. That was due last week, but if you are still working on it, please turn that in as soon as possible. This week is our last week before our final exam. So today and tomorrow we're going to be looking at the Bill of Rights, how it applies to you, so the actual application and laws around it, as well as kind of different ways that the Bill of Rights has been interpreted over the years or seen over the years. Next week we will have our final exam on Wednesday. So this week, Wednesday, Thursday, and then next week, Tuesday, we will be spending all that time for reviewing. I want to make sure, right, that we are doing well and are able to move through the final exam swiftly. Perfect. So we'll jump right in. Hopefully, right, the Bill of Rights is somewhat familiar to you guys. You had a chance to kind of look it over, create a booklet or a PowerPoint slide that went over each amendment, but we're going to take a little bit deeper dive in the next 2 days. So, today, we're going to be looking at the Bill of Rights. For those that may not remember, right, the Bill of Rights is attached to our Constitution. It was an agreement between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists to kind of make sure that the government wouldn't have too much power, wouldn't have the ability to take away the rights of individuals. So who determines what the Bill of Rights means? So it was written down over 200 years ago. Who determines what modern day problems apply? And the answer to that is the judicial branch, or the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is charged with interpretation of the law of the Constitution. And so they will decide what it means to have the freedom of speech. Does it cover everything or only certain things? In the First Amendment, we have 5 rights that are protected. So a lot of things happening in this First Amendment. The first one is the freedom of speech. The second one is the freedom of religion. Third, freedom of press. Fourth, freedom of assembly. And fifth, freedom to petition the government. And we'll go over each of these step by step. So first off, freedom of speech. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. There are limits, however. You cannot threaten to blow up planes, schools, or the president. Threats are not covered in free speech. So you may hear someone say, yes, I have the right to threaten you. It's my free speech. They do not. That is a threat. Sexual harassment. That is also not covered by free speech. So in a situation of sexual harassment, someone says, oh, I have free speech. You do not. That is incorrect. If you're speaking or what you are doing is causing too much social chaos, for example, if you walk into a movie theater and say that it is on fire and a stampede happens, you do not have the freedom of speech in that instance. You were not only lying, but that lie could have caused physical damage to other people. Extremely crude language in public forum. You cannot stand on a corner and curse people out. It's illegal. It's not what you can do. Disrespectful, vulgar language in school. So anything that is deemed, not school appropriate, you don't really have that right to free speech in those instances. And hate crimes. Hate crimes are not covered in free speech. You can't commit a crime and be like, oh yes, free speech. What individuals can do, however, they can say any political belief. They have the right to a political belief and be able to say that political belief. They can protest without getting out of control. So you can protest, and nonviolent protests are great, but as soon as you are vandalizing property, breaking into buildings, or anything catches on fire, that has now turned from a protest escalated into a riot, into multiple other forms. At that point, it is not protected by the freedom of speech. You can say things about someone that are true. If you so choose, you can burn a flag, Bible, those things. It's not recommended, but it is protected. You can say racist and hate slogans. Those are protected by free speech. Even though, we'll see how that changes in the upcoming years. Free speech essentially ends up meaning, right, that someone might say something you disagree with. Everyone has a right to talk. You don't always have to listen, and you don't have to necessarily engage. But they do have that freedom of speech. Freedom of religion. So Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So there's two parts to this, saying that essentially the government shall not create or establish a religion. They also may not prevent you from exercising your religion. We'll talk a little bit about how that gets So freedom of religion is something that has come up quite often in schools. So in schools, the religion issue is very prevalent, particularly back when I was in school. So if, let's say, a student raises their hand and asks, "Hey teacher, can we say an opening prayer before this test?" If the teacher says yes, then it looks like they're trying to establish religion in the classroom. If they say no, then it seems like they are trying to deny student the ability to practice their religion. So what has come out of this is essentially that individual students can practice their religion during school hours. However, teachers cannot force or encourage religious participation during school hours. So Establishment Clause. Government cannot promote religion. This, in theory, right, the government cannot promote religion one way or the other. However, you will probably notice if you listen to any political speech, they often do bring up religion, quite often, and often as well as like Christian values. America was founded by Christians. However, while it kind of is woven into the government, it is not officially a government religion, and they cannot officially anymore promote it. Back in the day, definitely. So the government can teach about religions in schools. You guys probably would have learned about like Hinduism, Buddhism in the past. I have to allow a voluntary prayer. If you would like to pray, feel free. They can help transport students to religious schools. And if English class or culture class, wanted to, they could read the Bible. What they cannot do, the state of Michigan cannot decide, right, that we are now going to be a Buddhist state. That will not work. A state or government entity cannot order prayer. We cannot teach religious doctrine in schools. That is why most churches will have Sunday schools for that. The government cannot pay church or religious school teachers, and we do not teach creationism. People, on the other hand, can choose any religion. You have that ability to choice. we'll talk a little bit about that. Lead a prayer in most instances. Ask questions about religions. The problem with some of the free exercise is that up until very recently, a lot of religions were still kind of banned in religious practices, particularly up until I think it was the 80s. Indigenous groups, so Native Americans, many aspects of their traditional religions were banned and outlawed. So there are components, right, of free practice, but that may not cover everyone and everyone's practice throughout American history. More recently, this has become more of a forefront. A lot of battles and legal cases have happened around it. But during the time period of the creation of the Constitution, it was actually, in fact, illegal for certain religions to practice. I know, it's kind of contradictory. People cannot break the law and claim it's a religious belief. You cannot burn down a building and just say, hey, nope, that's part of my religion is every week I have to burn down a building. No, you can't do that. You cannot raise children without education and say it is your religious belief. And you cannot deprive children of basic needs and call it a religious belief. So freedom of press. So Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of press. So the press or the news can print any political position, make fun of people, especially politicians. This is not the case when I was teaching in China. You don't get to print your political position, and you definitely don't get to make fun of politicians. You can, in theory, expose wrongs by the government, and you can say things you might not agree with. What you cannot do, you cannot intentionally lie about someone and harm their reputation. So you can't print false lies. You cannot disclose classified government secrets. And you do not get to detail how to make certain weapons in the newspaper. So two of these often come into conflict, and that is to expose wrongs by the government and to disclose classified government secrets. Because oftentimes those can go hand in hand. So what can be classified can also sometimes be wrongs done by the government. And so just know that there's been a lot of legal battles of, am I protected by being able to expose the wrongs of the government, or was it considered classified, and am I going to get in trouble? So, assembly. Congress shall make no law abridging the people's right to peacefully assemble. So, assemble, protest, that is fine, right? So people can protest. That's fine. Small protests, great. Big protests, great. You can parade. Make sure you have a permit, but you can set a parade. And if you so choose, you can parade chanting hate slogans. That is still also protected. Not the best thing, but still protected. And you can gather in public land, in public parks, and do a protest there. What you cannot do, you cannot throw rocks, break windows, breaking and entering, any vandalism. That is no longer protected by the freedom of assembly. And you cannot hang out or loiter on private land and call it a protest. You can call it a protest, but it won't be protected by the Bill of Rights. Lastly, is you have the right to petition the government. So Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people to petition the government for redress of grievances. So if there's been a problem with the government, or the government did something wrong, you have the right to try and force them to fix it or give you compensation. So you can sue the government for wrongdoings, and this has happened multiple times throughout the, years. You'll be able to read one in the in our reading for today. You cannot be punished for exposing wrongs by the government. Once again, because if that wrong is technically classified, then you will be punished. And who gets to decide if, there was wrongs? The court. So it's a weird situation where if the government does wrong, you can sue the government and try and convince another part of the government that they did wrong. So it gets a little dodgy. Okay, so those are the 5 basic rights protected by the First Amendment. The First Amendment is a big, heavy, important one. So I want to make sure that we spend enough time on this. For today, there is a reading. If you go under week 17, you'll see not only this PowerPoint, but you'll see reading questions. So if you click on that assignment, there will be the reading in PDF format, and there will also be a link that says reading questions, and it'll link you to a Google form. There are 6 questions over the reading, and that should be there and ready for you to work on. If you do end up having any questions, please send me an email, or jump into the Google Meet. Perfect. Well, I hope you have a great day, and I will send out another video tomorrow.